Marcus did not want to go to the party. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, tie half knotted, staring at a man who looked like he had not slept properly since the previous administration. He yanked the tie loose and dropped it on the counter. Nobody at a neighborhood cookout needed a tie. He was not sure what he had been thinking. He was not sure he had been thinking at all. His daughter, Deja, appeared in the doorway. She was 7 years old, wearing a yellow dress she had picked out herself, and she was looking at him the way only children look at their parents, with a clarity so clean it cut. "Daddy," she said, "your shirt has a stain on it." He looked down. There it was, a small orange mark near the second button, left over from the spaghetti dinner 2 nights ago that he had been too tired to notice. He changed the shirt. He ran a comb through his hair. He picked up his keys. They were going to the party. The drive over took 4 minutes. Their neighbor, Glenn, had been throwing this cookout every summer for 6 years. Glenn was the kind of man who enjoyed gathering people, who could talk to a stop sign and make it feel welcomed. He had personally shown up at Marcus's door that morning, holding a spatula for reasons that were never explained, and told him the cookout started at 2 and that he expected to see both of them there. Marcus had said yes because it was easier than saying no. He had also said yes because, if he was being honest with himself in the way he rarely allowed, he had not left the house for anything that was not work or groceries or Deja's school in longer than he wanted to count. The backyard was already crowded when they arrived. Children were chasing each other across the grass. Adults stood in loose groups, holding drinks, talking in the comfortable, overlapping way of people who knew each other well. Someone had put up string lights along the fence even though it was the middle of the afternoon, and a speaker near the grill was playing something with a slow, warm beat that floated under all the noise. Marcus found the chip bowl. He stood near it with a plate he was not using, and looked at the yard like a man studying a map of a country he had never visited. He knew some of these people. Glenn's wife, Carol, waved at him from across the yard, and he waved back. A man named Dwight, who lived 2 streets over, nodded at him, and Marcus nodded back. These were not conversations. These were acknowledgments. Deja had already disappeared into the crowd of children. He watched the spot where she had last been and then looked away. She was fine. She was always fine in these situations. She was her mother's daughter in that way. Easy with people. Easy with rooms. Able to walk into a space and make it feel like she had always belonged there. Marcus was not like that. He never had been. He picked up a chip and ate it without tasting it, and looked at the yard again. That was when he saw the woman by the fence. She was standing near the far left corner, slightly apart from the nearest group of people, holding a paper cup in both hands. She was not talking to anyone. She was not on her phone. She was just standing there with the stillness of someone who had decided, some time ago, that the cost of trying to join a conversation she had not been invited into was higher than she wanted to pay. She was watching the children play. Her expression was not sad exactly. It was the expression of someone managing something privately, and managing it well. Marcus looked away. He looked back. He had never seen her at one of Glenn's cookouts before. The afternoon moved the way slow summer afternoons do. Not quickly, not slowly, just continuously. Like water moving over flat ground, kids ran. Adults laughed. The grill put smoke into the air that smelled like every cookout that had ever happened. Glenn moved through the yard with the energy of a man who genuinely loved this, clapping people on the back, refilling drinks, pulling chairs from somewhere to add to already crowded circles. Marcus ate 2 more chips. He moved from the chip bowl to a spot near the drinks table and stood there for a while. He considered going to find Deja, but he could hear her voice somewhere in the yard, high and bright and absolutely fine, so he stayed where he was. He looked at the woman by the fence again. She was still there. The paper cup was still in her hands. He wondered if she had drunk any of it. He thought about walking over. He thought about what he would say. He thought about the 11-day number, the count he had not meant to start keeping, the number of days since he had sat across from another adult and talked about something that was not logistics, or scheduling, or Deja's upcoming school project on the water cycle. 11 days. He looked down at the chip he was holding. Deja appeared at his elbow. She had a juice box in one hand and a very serious expression on her face. She tugged his sleeve with 2 fingers, the way she did when she had something important to report. "Daddy," she said quietly, "that lady over there looks like she needs a friend." Marcus looked at his daughter. His daughter looked at him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Deja walked away to find her juice box straw, and Marcus looked at the woman by the fence, and he thought about the particular wisdom of 7-year-olds, who have not yet learned to talk themselves out of the obvious thing. He put his plate down. He started walking. He had no plan. He had no opener, no clever line, no strategy. He walked across Glenn's backyard with his hands at his sides, and his heart doing something it had not done in a long time. Not racing, not dramatic, just present, just awake in a way he had gotten used to it not being. She noticed him when he was about 6 feet away. She looked at him with the careful, measuring look of a woman who had learned to take the temperature of a situation before committing to it. He stopped. He nodded. He said, "You've been standing here for a while. I figured either the fence is very interesting or you might want company." She looked at him for one more second. Then she said, "The fence is not that interesting." He laughed. It was the first real laugh he had produced in longer than he could track. Her name was Renee. She had come to the cookout because her coworker had insisted. Her coworker's exact words had been, "You need to be around people, Renee. You cannot spend every weekend in that house." And Renee had not had a good argument against it, so here she was, standing by Glenn's fence, holding a cup of lemonade she had forgotten to drink. She had a 5-year-old named Caleb, who was currently on the other side of the yard, using a lawn chair as some kind of spacecraft. Marcus looked in the direction she pointed, and found Caleb immediately. He was standing on the seat of the chair with both arms out, making sounds with his mouth that were either rocket propulsion or a very confident dinosaur. It was difficult to tell. "That's a committed kid," Marcus said. "He once spent 45 minutes pretending a cardboard box was a submarine," Renee said. "I fed him lunch through a hole I cut in the side." Marcus looked at her. She was not performing the story. She was just telling it, the way you tell something that is simply true, and the corner of her mouth was pulled up in the way of someone who has already decided the memory is funny, even though it probably wasn't at the time. He told her about Deja. She asked questions, real ones, not the kind people ask to fill silence, but the kind that meant she was listening to the answer. The afternoon moved differently after that. He did not notice the chip bowl. He did not count how long it had been since he had talked to someone. The yard around them kept going, children and grill smoke, and Glenn's laugh rising above everything else at regular intervals. And Marcus stood near the fence with a woman he had not known 2 hours ago and felt, for the first time in longer than 11 days, like a person who existed in the same world as other people, rather than just adjacent to it. Deja found Caleb somewhere in the middle of all of it. By the time Marcus noticed, the 2 of them were sitting in the grass together, with 3 juice boxes between them, conducting what appeared to be a very serious negotiation. "They move fast," Renee said. "Wish I could," Marcus said, and then was not sure why he had said it, and looked away. The string lights came on as the sun started to drop, even though it was still light enough to see clearly, and the yard got louder and warmer, in the way parties do, when everyone has relaxed into the fact that the evening is good. Marcus stood near the fence with Renee, and they talked. That was all. That was the whole of it. And somehow, in the ordinary fact of 2 people standing in a backyard talking about their kids and their weeks, and the particular exhaustion that comes from doing everything alone, something in Marcus that had been very quiet for a very long time came back online. He did not name it. He just felt it. And he stayed. Renee had not expected to enjoy herself. That was not something she admitted to people easily. The low ceiling she had placed on the afternoon before it started. The mental calculation she had run on the drive over, in which she had decided that if she survived 2 hours without embarrassing herself, she would call the day a success. She had survived more than 2 hours. She was not sure how. She was talking to a man she had not met before tonight. A man who stood with the quiet of someone who did not feel the need to fill every silence. And she was not performing anything. She was not laughing harder than things were funny. She was not managing the conversation the way she usually managed conversations at events like this, moving it along, keeping it light, making sure the other person was comfortable enough that they would not notice she was not. She was just talking. It was unfamiliar enough to feel like something she should pay attention to. Marcus was not a man who announced himself. He was not loud. He did not have the kind of energy that reorganized a room when he walked into it. He was tall, with a careful way of standing, and he listened to things the whole way through before he responded, which was something Renee had not encountered in a while. She noticed his hands, at some point during the conversation, and then felt strange for noticing, and looked away. Caleb appeared at her side around 6 o'clock, dragging the lawn chair he had repurposed as a spacecraft, deeply unhappy about something. "Mom," he said, "Deja says there is no such thing as a submarine rocket, and she is wrong." Deja arrived 2 seconds later. "There is not," Deja said, with great firmness. Marcus crouched down to Deja's level. He said, "What makes you say there's no such thing?" Deja crossed her arms. "Submarines go in water. Rockets go in space. They are opposite things." Marcus considered this with apparent seriousness. Then he said, "But what if you needed to go from the water to space? You'd need a vehicle that does both." Deja's expression shifted. She was thinking about it. Caleb pointed at his lawn chair. "That's what this is," he said. Deja looked at the lawn chair. She looked at Caleb. "It doesn't have any engines," she said, but she said it with less certainty. "They're invisible," Caleb said. Renee watched her son and this man's daughter reach, over the course of 90 seconds, some kind of armistice that she could not fully follow. They walked away together. The lawn chair went with them. She looked at Marcus, who was standing up again. "You just told her a submarine rocket is possible," Renee said. "I told her it was possible in theory," Marcus said. "There's a difference. That is going to come back to haunt you." "Most things do," he said, and there was something in the way he said it, not heavy, not performing anything, just true, that made her stop and look at him for a moment. The party thinned as the sky changed colors. People picked up their dishes and their children and their folding chairs. Glenn moved through the yard saying goodbye to everyone, shaking hands, promising next summer, already planning. The string lights hummed on. The speaker played something softer now. Caleb fell asleep. It happened the way it always happened, with no warning. One moment he was at the edge of the yard, doing something involving 2 sticks and intense focus. The next he was sitting against the fence with his head tilted and his eyes closed, the stick still in his hands. Renee looked at him and felt the familiar shift, the logistics of a sleeping child, the calculation of how to get him to the car without waking him, the weight of him across a parking lot, the angle of the car seat. She had done it 100 times. She could do it again. She started gathering her things, the bag with the extra wipes and the change of clothes she always carried, Caleb's shoes, which he had taken off at some point and left near the grill, the leftover party favors Deja had pressed into Caleb's hands earlier, little pinwheels and a packet of stickers. Marcus was beside her. He said, "Do you need help getting him to the car?" She looked at him. He said it the way you say something obvious, not as an offer being carefully extended, not as a performance of helpfulness, just as the next logical sentence given the situation. "It's across the parking lot," she said. "I know where it is," he said. She looked at him for one more second. Then she said, "Okay." He picked Caleb up from the ground, the way you pick up a sleeping child, carefully, shifting the weight so the kid's head found a natural place against his shoulder. Caleb did not wake up. He made a small sound and pressed his face into Marcus's collar and stayed asleep. They walked. The parking lot was quiet. The evening was cooler now, the kind of cool that comes after a long, warm day, and the string lights from Glenn's backyard were still visible over the fence, throwing a low gold light across the asphalt. Renee walked beside Marcus and she did not say anything, and neither did he, and the silence was not uncomfortable. It was the specific kind of silence that happens between people who have talked enough that they do not need to fill space. She unlocked the car. Marcus bent and positioned Caleb into the car seat, reaching across to pull the straps into place. His hands worked with a steadiness that came from repetition. The pull of the left strap, the click of the clasp, the slight tightening to make sure. He checked it without being asked. He stood up and stepped back. Renee stood on the other side of the open door, holding the bag and the pinwheels and the stickers, watching him. She was not a woman who lost her composure in parking lots. She had made a long practice of holding things together in public and saving the falling apart for home, for the shower, for the 15 minutes after Caleb went to bed, when she sat at the kitchen table and felt all the weight of the day at once. But something about watching a man she had met 3 hours ago buckle her son into a car seat, with care, with steadiness, without being asked, without making it into anything, made something inside her very quiet and very full at the same time. She closed the car door. She said, "Thank you." Marcus said, "Of course." He waited while she walked around to the driver's side and got in. He lifted his hand in a small wave as she backed out. She watched him in the rearview mirror as she turned onto the street, standing in the parking lot under the ordinary light of a summer evening. She drove home. She did not say anything to Caleb, who was still asleep. She did not put the radio on. She drove the familiar route in the quiet, and she thought about the weight of a paper cup held in 2 hands, and a man who stood by a chip bowl for no reason, and the way things sometimes begin not with a grand moment, but with the simple fact of someone choosing to walk across a yard. She pulled into her driveway. Caleb stirred. "Mom?" he said, not fully awake. "Is the submarine rocket ready?" "Almost," she said. "Sleep." He slept. She sat in the parked car for a moment longer. Then she went inside. She told her sister about it the next morning. Her sister's name was Patrice, and Patrice had been trying to get Renee to go on dates for the better part of 2 years, with the relentless energy of someone who had found happiness and genuinely believed it was available to everyone if they would simply cooperate. Renee called her while Caleb was eating breakfast, standing in the kitchen, keeping her voice low in the way she did when she was telling Patrice something she did not want to examine too closely in the open air. She told her about the party, the fence, the man named Marcus, the walk to the parking lot. Patrice was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "He sounds boring." Renee laughed. She did not argue. She stood in the kitchen and laughed, and Caleb looked up from his cereal with the alert expression of a child who suspects he is missing something. "He's not boring," Renee said. "He's quiet." "Same thing," Patrice said. "It is not the same thing," Renee said. But she did not explain the difference. She was not sure she could. Not in a way that Patrice would understand over the phone on a Sunday morning. The difference between quiet and boring was not something you could describe easily. It was something you felt, or you didn't. Patrice moved on to other questions. What did he look like? What did he do for work? Was he seeing anyone? Renee answered what she knew, which was not much, and Patrice cataloged each gap in information like a woman filing evidence. "You didn't even get his number," Patrice said. "No," Renee said. "Renee." "I know. So that's it? A nice man buckled your kid's car seat, and now he just exists somewhere in the neighborhood, and you have no way to find him?" Renee looked at the window above the sink. Outside, the morning was clear and still. "He knows Glenn," she said. "They're neighbors." "That is not a plan," Patrice said. "It's not a plan," Renee agreed. "It's just true." Patrice let out a long breath. "You are genuinely difficult," she said. And it was said with the particular exasperation of a sister who loves you and cannot understand you and never quite stops trying. They talked for a few more minutes, and then Patrice had to go, and Renee was left in the kitchen with the phone in her hand and Caleb eating the last of his cereal. "Mom," Caleb said, "can I have more?" She got him more cereal. She went about the Sunday the way she went about every Sunday: laundry, and the park, and lunch, and the particular small negotiations of a day with a 5-year-old. They walked to the park 2 blocks over. Caleb went down the slide 17 times. She sat on the bench and watched him and felt the ordinary texture of the day under her hands. She thought about Marcus once, standing at the edge of the park while Caleb inspected something in the wood chips. Then Caleb called her name and she went. That evening, after Caleb was in bed, she sat at the kitchen table. This was her 15 minutes. The time she had learned to protect. The time when she was allowed to feel the full weight of the week and the day and the year without having to manage it. She thought about the party. She thought about standing by the fence for 20 minutes holding a cup she never drank from, running the quiet calculation she had become expert at, how to be present enough to count as being there without spending anything she didn't have. She had not run that calculation with Marcus. She had just talked. She picked up her phone. She opened the neighborhood group chat. It was a chat she mostly used to find out when the recycling schedule changed, or whether anyone had seen a loose dog. She scrolled through the names. Marcus Green. There it was. She looked at it for a moment. She did not send a message. She put her phone down and finished her tea and went to bed. Across town, in a house she had never been inside, Marcus was doing something similar. He had given Deja her bath, the whole long negotiation of it, the hair washing, and the complaints about the hair washing, and the eventual resolution involving a towel shaped like a duck. He had read her 2 chapters of the book they were in the middle of, and she had fallen asleep before the second chapter ended, the way she always did. He had turned off her light and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the quiet of the house. Then he had gone downstairs. He sat in the kitchen for a while. He had a glass of water. He thought about the party, the chip bowl, the 11 days, and a woman holding a paper cup in both hands by a fence in the last light of a summer afternoon. He opened the neighborhood group chat. He found her name. He sat with the phone in his hand and thought about what to say, and then he thought about saying nothing, and then he thought about the laugh she had produced when he said the thing about the fence. Not a polite laugh, not a social noise, but a real one, the kind that arrives without being planned. He typed, "It was good to meet you." Deja already drew a picture of Caleb's submarine rocket. He looked at the message. He sent it. He put the phone down. He picked it up again immediately. That was it. The message was sent. There was nothing to do but wait or not wait, and not waiting was simply the act of putting the phone in another room, which he did. He went back to the kitchen. He drank his water. His phone buzzed from the other room. He waited a full 10 seconds before going to get it. Renee had written back, and he hasn't stopped talking about her since we got home. Then, after a short pause, "Thank you for walking us out." Marcus held the phone and looked at those words and thought about what it takes for someone to say thank you for something small, whether it means the small thing wasn't small, whether it means the person on the other end has learned to notice when someone shows up because they have been in rooms where no one did. He wrote back, "It was easy." She wrote, "Most things that matter are." He read that 3 times. Then he wrote, "Can I ask you something?" She wrote, "Sure." He wrote, "Do you want to go somewhere? Just us. No kids, no Glenn's yard. Somewhere we can actually hear each other." The 3 dots appeared. They went away. They appeared again. He stood in his kitchen and looked at those 3 dots and felt the full presence of the moment. She wrote, "Yes." He breathed out slowly. He wrote, "Saturday?" She wrote, "Saturday." He put the phone down on the counter. He did not pick it up again. He stood in the kitchen of his quiet house with the window above the sink showing nothing but the dark and the neighbor's porch light, and he felt something move through him that was not excitement exactly, not nervousness exactly, but the specific aliveness of a person who has been holding their breath for a long time and has finally, quietly, let it go. Saturday came the way things come, when you have been thinking about them for a week, both faster and slower than expected. Marcus arrived at the coffee shop 8 minutes early. He sat at a table near the window, ordered a coffee he did not need, and watched the door with the kind of deliberate calm of a man who is pretending very successfully not to be thinking about anything. He was thinking about everything. He had changed his shirt twice. The second shirt was blue, a simple blue shirt, the kind that said nothing except that someone had put it on with intention. Deja had approved it. She had looked at him from across the kitchen table with her cereal spoon raised and said, "You look like a person, Daddy," which was her version of a compliment, and which he had decided to take as encouragement. Renee walked in at 8 minutes past the hour. She had not told him she was coming from dropping Caleb at Patrice's, and that Patrice had delayed her by asking 30 questions about the man she was meeting. each one delivered with the energy of a prosecutor who had been watching too much courtroom television. She had extracted herself from her sister's apartment with her patience mostly intact, and gotten here, and that felt like enough of an accomplishment for one morning. She saw him at the window table. He had already seen her. They did the thing where two people who have only met once try to gauge from across a room whether the memory of the other person matches the reality. In Marcus's case, the reality was better. In Renee's case, she was careful not to finish that thought. She sat down across from him. "You're early," she said. "I'm always early," he said. "It's a problem." "I'm always late," she said. "Caleb hides one shoe. Every time. I don't know where he learns these things." Marcus said, "Deja puts things in cups. Last Tuesday I was 15 minutes late for a conference call because my car keys were in a mug." Renee looked at him. "Did she explain why?" "She said she was keeping them safe." "That's actually kind of sweet." "It was not sweet. At 7:45 in the morning," he said, and then smiled. And it was the same smile she remembered from the party, the one that arrived a beat later than expected and stayed. The coffee shop was warm and not too crowded. There was a machine somewhere that made a sound every few minutes, and the smell of roasted coffee was the kind of smell that made a place feel like a place. They ordered, they talked. This was different from the party. The party had been surrounded by noise, and people, and the constant soft interruption of a social event. This was just a table and two cups, and the particular clarity of a Saturday morning with nowhere else to be. Renee learned things. She learned that Marcus had grown up in Cincinnati and moved here for a job at an engineering firm, and had never quite finished deciding whether he was staying. She learned that he had been raising Deja alone for 4 years, that the silence of it and the weight of it and the complete all-consuming fullness of it had become so normal that he had stopped measuring himself against a version of his life where things were different. She did not ask him about Deja's mother. He did not offer it. Some spaces in a conversation are not gaps to fill but rooms with closed doors, and she knew the difference. She told him things. That Caleb's father had been kind and well-meaning, and completely wrong for her in all the ways that take years to understand. That she had spent 2 years after their split convincing herself she was fine before she started actually being fine. That fine and thriving were different countries, and she was somewhere in the territory between them, which was progress, and she was choosing to call it that. Marcus listened to all of it. He did not rush to fill the pauses. He did not offer solutions or parallels or redirect the conversation to something lighter when the weight appeared. He sat across from her, and he was present in the way she had stopped expecting people to be present, fully, without reservation, without one eye on the exit. "Can I tell you something?" she said, somewhere in the second hour. "Yes," he said. "When you walked us to the car last week," she said, "and you buckled Caleb in." She stopped. He waited. "I've been doing everything alone for long enough that I forgot what it feels like when someone just does a thing," she said. "Not because they're trying to prove something, not because they want credit, just because it's the next thing to do." Marcus looked at her. "I know what that's like," he said. "The alone part." "I know you do," she said. They sat with that for a moment. Outside, the street moved with Saturday morning people, walkers and coffee carriers and dogs on leashes. A little boy went past the window at high speed on a scooter, and his mother jogged behind him with the expression of a woman who had agreed to this and was now fully committed. Renee watched them and laughed. Marcus watched her laugh. He thought about 11 days. He thought about chip bowls and string lights, and the way a person could stand in a backyard full of people and be completely alone until they weren't. He did not say any of that. He said, "Same time next Saturday?" Renee looked at him. "Caleb has a thing at 10, she said. "I can do 9, he said. She smiled. It was not the managed smile from the party, the one she wore like light armor. It was the real one, the one that surprised her. 9, she said. They sat there a little longer, finishing their coffee, while the morning moved around them, and neither of them was in a hurry. And that in itself was something. They did not fall fast. This was not a love story written by someone who had not been broken. This was a love story written by two people who knew exactly how long it took to put things back together, who had done the work of putting themselves together alone, and who were not in any rush to hand that work to someone else to undo. They did Saturdays, 9 o'clock coffee, and then sometimes the park after, where Deja and Caleb, who had declared themselves best friends with the speed and total confidence of children, could be supervised and argued with, and fed things from the snack bag Renee always carried. Deja had decided, very early on, that she liked Renee. She communicated this, not with words but with actions, sitting next to her at the park bench, showing her drawings with the solemn presentation of an artist at a gallery opening, asking her once, on a Tuesday phone call between their parents, whether she preferred cats or dogs. Renee had said cats. Deja had considered this for a moment and then said, "That's okay." High praise, Marcus told her later. Caleb liked Marcus in the uncomplicated way that little boys sometimes attach to quiet men who take their ideas seriously. He had explained the submarine rocket concept to Marcus over the course of 3 visits, adding new features each time, and Marcus had asked real questions about each feature, and Caleb had answered with the authority of the original inventor, which in his mind he was. Marcus had also fixed a wheel on Caleb's bicycle one afternoon, without being asked. Just noticed it was loose and fixed it, and Caleb had watched him do it with the expression of someone storing the memory carefully. Renee had watched too, from the front step, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. She noticed his hands again, and this time she did not feel strange about it. The weeks moved into months the way good things move, with weight and texture, not with the feathery rush of something too quick to be trusted. They learned each other the way you learn a place you are going to live in, slowly, room by room, not demanding that every door open at once. She learned that he was funny in the way that only very quiet people are funny, with a dry timing and a total commitment to the bit that made things land harder because you hadn't seen them coming. She learned that he took Deja's school very seriously and had strong opinions about the reading program, which she found charming rather than intense. She learned that he cooked well, which she discovered when he made dinner one evening for all 4 of them. Something with rice and vegetables, and a sauce that Caleb ate without complaint, which was a miracle Renee reported to Patrice with genuine awe. He learned that she was tougher than she looked, which was very tough. He learned that she cried at commercials and was embarrassed about it, and he never once made it a thing to laugh about. He learned that she had strong opinions about how things should be organized, which meant she reorganized the spice cabinet in his kitchen one Sunday afternoon, while he stood in the doorway watching, and he let her, and then she stopped and looked at him and said, "I just reorganized your whole cabinet and you didn't say anything." And he said, "It's better now." And she laughed the real laugh, and he decided that hearing that laugh was one of the better things in his life. The people from Glenn's cookout heard about them eventually, in the way that neighborhood information travels, not quickly but completely. Glenn himself mentioned it to Marcus one afternoon over the fence, with the satisfied expression of a man who throws cookouts for exactly this reason. "That's the woman from last summer," Glenn said. "The one by the fence." "Yes," Marcus said. Glenn smiled. "Good," he said. He left it at that. Carol, Glenn's wife, told Renee she was happy for her at the grocery store one Wednesday, squeezing her arm and meaning it, and Renee said thank you and meant that too. Patrice came around. It took until she met Marcus in person, which happened at Caleb's 6th birthday party, a controlled chaos in Renee's backyard, involving a sprinkler and a piñata and 17 children of varying ages. Marcus had come with Deja, who immediately disappeared into the crowd. Marcus had stayed near Renee and helped with things without being asked, the way he did, quietly and without announcement. Patrice had watched him across the yard. Later, she called Renee and said, "Okay, I was wrong. He's not boring." Renee said, "I know. He's the kind of quiet that means something," Patrice said. "I know," Renee said again. "How do you always know these things?" Patrice said, in the tone of a sister who is sincerely asking. Renee thought about a parking lot in summer, a sleeping child, hands working carefully in the low light. "You just feel it," she said. There was not a single dramatic moment when she knew. There were many small ones. The evening he stayed on the phone with her for an hour while Caleb had a fever, not to advise, not to fix it, just to be there while she moved around the apartment checking on her son. The morning Deja asked Renee to help her with her hair, and Renee had sat on the floor of Marcus's bathroom working through it carefully, while Deja gave her instructions and opinions, and Marcus had stood in the doorway with 2 glasses of juice, watching his daughter trust someone new. The afternoon at the park when Caleb fell and skinned his knee badly, and cried with the full force of a 6-year-old in real pain, and Marcus had picked him up without hesitating, held him, talked him down from the edge of the moment, and Caleb had pressed his face into Marcus's shoulder, and cried, and been held until he was done. Renee had stood 2 feet away watching this, and felt something in her chest, not breaking exactly, but shifting, something that had been very carefully positioned for a very long time, moving. They did not rush. But they were building something, in the quiet and ordinary way that real things get built, not with grand declarations and dramatic gestures, but with dinners, and homework and sick evenings, and park mornings, and the 100 small moments of choosing to show up. Marcus had stopped counting the days since he had talked to another adult. He had stopped because the counting had become irrelevant, and things that are irrelevant stop being measured. On a Sunday in early autumn, the 4 of them were in Renee's kitchen after the park, Caleb and Deja at the table with coloring books, Marcus at the counter helping with something, Renee at the stove. The light through the window was the particular golden light of October afternoons, the kind that makes everything look like a memory while it's still happening. Caleb looked up from his coloring book. "Marcus," he said, "is this our house too?" The kitchen went quiet. Not uncomfortably, just fully. Marcus looked at Caleb. He looked at Deja, who was watching with the same patient expression she had worn the day she said that lady looks like she needs a friend. He looked at Renee, who was watching him. He said, to Caleb, "What do you think?" Caleb looked around the kitchen with the serious assessment of a 6-year-old weighing all available evidence. He looked at his coloring book. He looked at the fruit bowl on the table. He looked at Marcus. "It smells like our house," Caleb said. Deja nodded. She returned to her coloring. Renee turned back to the stove. Marcus stood in the kitchen in the gold afternoon light, and something inside him that had been very quiet for a very long time was not quiet anymore. Not loud, just present, full, awake in a way that had no name other than being. This was how it had started. A chip bowl, a fence, a cup of lemonade nobody drank, a little girl who said the obvious thing, a man who finally stopped talking himself out of it. It did not start with fire. It started with a parking lot and a car seat buckle, and 2 people who had carried enough weight alone that the simple act of sharing one small corner of it felt like the most significant thing in the world. They built it slowly. They built it right. And in a kitchen that smelled like home, on a Sunday in October, with their children coloring at the table, and the light coming gold through the window, Marcus looked at Renee, and she looked back at him, and neither of them said anything, because nothing needed to be said, and everything that needed to be understood had already been understood, quietly, without announcement, in the long, ordinary way that real things last.